Welcome to a brand new section dedicated to Node.js, the essentials, to give you all the core competency to be able to work with Node.js. In this section, we're going to go ahead and understand what Node.js is. We're going to create a Hello World Node.js application. We're going to learn how to load packages and use modules. We've seen how to load packages already with npm, but we're going to see what the difference is between a package and a module is. We're going to go ahead and configure a basic server as well and use a third-party package or module, which is called HTTP server, to set up quickly a server. So let's jump right into it and let's start exploring the world of Node.js. We spent the last few chapters getting ready for this one, so let's not do too much theory, because what we're going to do here is create our first Hello World Node.js application as we create it and output hello world into the world. So let's jump right into it. Well, the first thing that we really want to do is we want to focus and pinpoint what Node.js is and really why are we working with Node.js. What makes it better than any other traditional server-side language? Now, when you think about it, PHP, MySQL, HTTPD, or more known as Apache, have been the traditional way of building websites. Now, the biggest problem, really the biggest problem with it, beyond the fact that it's so much easier to work with one language to do things for your database and your client side and all the different components of a website, including building up your server. But beyond that, beyond having only one language behind all these technologies, is that contrary to server-side languages in the past that depended on a server separately and depended on a language separately, so you had PHP, but then you had to have a server that would run your PHP. Contrary to that, Node.js is the solution of both the language and the server. Now, with this capability, it adds a lot of things that are really powerful by enabling you to have communications with your server that are direct. Now, what does that mean? These direct communications mean that you could have a call that then does something and returns back a value without your server hanging and waiting. Because what happens when PHP is, for example, you have two options. One option is to wait, where the server hangs everything and it waits until the action is completed. The other is to send it to even another technology, which is called a cron job, which will do the work disconnected from the server, but then you don't have a means of communication that are direct between your user that is supposedly waiting for some response. So with Node.js, really the brilliance of the combination of both the server and the language enables the server to basically not make the user wait as operations are happening on the server, letting the operations happen behind the scenes as we would want it to be, but then enabling the server then to, when a thing is ready, to send that information to the user when that information is ready. Now, that is done using callbacks, which we're going to look at briefly in this chapter and throughout really the remainder of this title, because that is the core way communications are made. So only when something is ready, it's then sent over to the user. All right, so that is really what makes Node.js so powerful. And that's really what I wanted you to get out of just the basics of what really is Node.js and why are we actually working with Node.js. Beyond that, there's a lot more examples on the web which have added documentation to this chapter that really lists out a lot of things that make Node.js better compared to PHP, which is one of the more common server-side languages. So I created a new empty folder, and I encourage you to do the same. You don't need the source files. And let's go ahead and create a new Node.js package. Now, a Node.js package is also an npm package because we're using npm to create it. And we already saw with npm that we just call that init function, and I'm going to skip the interview, and it will automatically create for me the package.json file. Now I could go ahead and then change if I want something in the name or the version. Right now we're fine with this version, but we might want to go back and say, no, this is not publicly ready yet, so we're still in version 0. But in reality, what we'll probably do is just work locally until we're ready and then release it to the world. We don't need to fill up any other information here. We're fine with everything in here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, once we have a project, the next step for us is actually to define our main JavaScript file, which is where our actual Node.js application will reside. So I want to create that index.js file. Now, I could go ahead and work with V or work with some sort of terminal type of editor, but I really don't like to, and most people don't unless you're a real heavy server-side developer. In general, you really just want to create the file and work with it with an editor that you're comfortable with. I like working with Sublime Text. So I'm just going to go ahead and touch that index.js file just to create the file. And once I've created the file, I'll see in my folder also the JS file, and I'm going to drag it into our editor, and we have our file. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to call console.log hello world. The most simple, most primitive application. One line that all it does is outputs to the console hello world. For me to test this application out and see if it actually works, I'm going to have to go back into my terminal. And in the terminal itself, instead of writing npm like we've been doing so far, I'm going to write node and the name of the file that I want to initialize or that I want to run. And if I go ahead and I run it, it's going to run our application and terminate and say hello world. And there you go. You just created your first most simple idiotic application. And let's step forward in the next lecture where we'll learn about really the core feature competency. One of the coolest things really that are really powerful in Node.js and NPM in general is how do you use packages that you install and you add. In this lecture, we created our first Node.js application. And in the next one, we're going to take a step deeper as we load in packages and use modules.